Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Trish Bartella. I currently lead our internal audit team at Target, and I am privileged and honored to be here today to moderate the discussion that we're all a part of here today. We have two inspiring leaders joining us this morning with a plan to share their career journeys, some leadership lessons, and more specifically, how NABA and Target are continuing to work to develop and advance Black professionals. Target has been engaged with NABA for about the past decade, aligning with our local chapter here in Minneapolis, where we're headquartered, sponsoring memberships, and supporting attendance and participation in events and national conferences. I've personally attended the national conference a couple of times, both facilitating development sessions, but also interviewing and hiring amazing talent for our team. Both of our organizations share a commitment to bridge the opportunity gap for Black professionals in the accounting, finance, and related professional fields. And both of these leaders come to this conversation with their own unique experiences that have got them where they are. And with that, I would love to jump into our conversation and introduce our guests. I will start with Herschel Frierson. Herschel is a principal at Crow with over 23 years of experience, and he's also the 27th chairman of the board of directors for the National Association of Black Accountants, or NABA. We have a huge contingent of NABA participants, but also Target participants on the call. And so for those of you that aren't aware of what NABA is, it's a nonprofit membership association that's dedicated to providing networking and career opportunities for Black accounting and finance professionals. Herschel was also recently named by Accounting Today as one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting. Also joining us today is Michael Fidelki. So Michael is the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for Target, a member of its executive leadership team, and fortunately for me, my boss. During his 15-year tenure at Target, Michael has moved throughout the company in a number of leadership positions across finance, merchandising, human resources, store operations, and he also serves on the board for our Minnesota Children's Museum. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us. We are going to start our conversation today with some stories. And I'd like to start with you, Herschel. Can you share with us your personal and career story? And maybe while you're telling that, emphasize a challenge that you've had to overcome along the way.
Yeah, no, I thank Trish. First and foremost, happy holidays to everyone. Hello to my NABA family. We call them family members within NABA. So really appreciate people taking their time out to join this conversation. And then the other thing I think is important before I kind of get into my journey is to also say thank you to Target, the Target family members that are joining us today. The one thing that sometimes me as a consumer and a customer Target that I take for granted around the holidays, just the great work that many of the store employees and corporate really do around this time. So, more specifically to all the Target family that is a part of this conversation today, let me say thank you. Appreciate everything you do around the holidays. Trish, first and foremost, thanks for the introduction. It's interesting every time I hear, how long I've been with the firm. I literally been with Crow my whole career, ever since I graduated. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. My mom was a school bus driver. My dad worked in the factory. And, I always say, who knew, pretty much close to 26 years later, that I will be, talking to the CFO of Target. I will be representing the National Association of Black Accountants, even more so less being the chairman. And I think, what I want to get away with all of this with everyone is that, everything is possible, anything is possible. But it takes a village to get us to where we need to be. That's what we talk about lifting as we climb. So started off at Crow, like I said, my whole career. And I just didn't see a lot of people that look like me in the profession. And I really struggled with that. So I got invited to this thing called the National Association of Black Accountants, NABA. to my first meeting. And I was like, wow, there are other people that look like me in the profession. And that really was a foundation to where I'm at today, to really push forward in making this more of a diverse and inclusive profession, not only for our family members at NABA, but just for everyone that look like me in the profession. And then obviously, Michael, just love to get your story and how that comes. The one thing I would say that I've learned in my career today is to, and I've shared this with young professors before, is don't get comfortable in what you've already accomplished, right? You want to keep pushing, you want to keep moving. I had so many pitfalls, but I did not let that deter me, right? And there are going to be doubters out there, but more importantly, there's going to be a lot of people that support you. Lean on those individuals that support you, because we're all in this together. So, Mike would love to hear your journey as well.
Yeah, thanks, Herschel. And first, just a huge welcome to everyone joining us this morning. Thanks, Trish, for facilitating. And Herschel, it's been fun to get to know you a little bit better recently. And I think Trish used the adjective inspiring to describe both of us. I'll let the audience be the judge of that, but you earned that adjective, Herschel. And so it's been just a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. My journey. I guess I'll do the short version and maybe just pull out a couple of things that stick with me most along the way. Like Trish said, I think I'm a little north of 17 years at Target now, and I would have never probably guessed that, but here I am sporting my Target red still 17 years later. I'm a finance guy at heart, but I've been in and out of finance over my career at Target. I've spent some time in our stores organization, store operations, spent some time in merchandising. I led the pay and benefits team and human resources for a while. And so there's a lot I could reflect on about business lessons learned, or how much I've fallen in love with retail, especially this time of year. Like, retail is just intoxicating. The feedback loop is so quick. We try stuff and it works or it doesn't. And our guests, what we call them as Target, the consumers, they let us know what we get right or get wrong immediately. And so I love that piece of the job. But something that is evolved for me over time is, if there's a kind of a pie chart of like where I spend my time as a leader throughout my career, the piece of that pie that is team and culture building has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point now where it's become clear, as I've learned lessons over time, my performance is nothing more or less than the reflection of my team's performance. And so I go to bed at night, I wake up in the morning thinking about team and culture, because when you get that right, well, then you can accomplish anything. And the benefit of being on so many different teams in different parts of the company throughout my career is that I see how important diversity of thought is to the performance of a team. High performing teams have diverse thought. Diverse thought is only possible through diverse perspective. And so to be so intentional about how we create that diverse perspective across the team, how we nurture it with a culture that's truly inclusive, those are the things that I'm most focused on, because when you get that right, anything else is possible.
It's interesting, Michael. I love the piece of the team, right? I think, whether it's NABA, whether it's Target, whether it's Crow, me as a leader is a reflection of how my team performs, right? If my team, I honestly struggle with getting praise, right? It is, I like praising other people. What I like to say, I like to give people a round of applause, right? Michael, give you a round of applause for your leadership. And it is important that you're only as good as your team, right? And Target wouldn't be successful, Crow wouldn't be successful, NABA wouldn't be successful if our key leaders did not have a strong team. And what you say is so right. And a strong team needs to be diverse, right? And that's what we're going to get into today, right? Is if the team only looks like you, Michael, I think you agree, is that we're not a reflection of the communities that we live and work in, but more importantly, we're not a reflection of just us as a society. Right.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Herschel. With 1,900 stores across the U.S., we talk a lot about, we need to reflect the communities that we serve, and the communities we serve are the whole country. And so that means we need to have that diversity represented through the team. But just as, if not more important than that, is having a culture that celebrates that diversity of thought. I mean, it's one thing to do the hard work to make sure we're being intentional with how we build the teams with the right balance across every dimension of difference. All of that's the right ingredients for a high performing team. But then you have to have a culture that capitalizes on that, where everyone can be their authentic self, and you seek out that diverse perspective and put it to use. Because if you're not doing that, then you're not drawing all the goodness from that diverse team out into the decision making of the business every day. And gosh, at Target, we just see firsthand every day how powerful that is when we get it right, and how important it is to keep working when we aren't.
Right. The one thing, and Trish, I know me and Michael can go on forever. And the one thing I would say is, when you say be your authentic self, the one thing we do at Crow, and we say at Crow, is be you and crush it, right? Be yourself and crush it. And that is so impactful. So
I love that, you guys both obviously told your career stories, very different stories. Those stories include successes, and clearly you've gotten to where you are. It's also likely included some challenges. And so I'd love to maybe hear from each of you about one challenge that you had to more specifically overcome and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge for me starting out, and I think it, still true today with so many young, diverse professionals, is being their authentic self at work. Is, what is an accountant supposed to be like in that? Like, so when I started out, I've shared the story, is I would come into the parking garage and switch the music that I would play. I would show up at work, and I would be shy to talk about the things I did outside of work that I didn't think conformed to whatever, quote unquote, what an accountant was supposed to be. And joining NABA helped me come out of my shell and say, you need to be happy as you as an individual. You need to be who you are, right? You need to say, yes, I enjoy hip hop and R&B music, right? It is okay for me to pull into the garage and turn up and play a little Jay-Z, right? And once I got comfortable in being who I am and being authentic, I brought my better self to work, right? To Crow, right? And that's why, my passion for NABA is so much, is because they were as a support system when I was really struggling to identify who I needed to be in corporate America. Mike, I know, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I think back about some of the biggest challenges career-wise for me, I think this applies in so many areas, whether it's a functional part of the business you're learning, or whether it's your own personal DI journey, is recognizing when you don't know, and when you need to be vulnerable, and when you need to be curious. And there are a couple of times in my career that have just hammered that home to me. I'll tell a quick anecdote. I'll try to keep it quick, but my first 5 years of my career were in finance. And 5 years in, I'd gotten to sit in different roles and kind of see through different windows of the business. And I thought I knew a lot about Target. I probably thought I was a pretty good leader. And then I moved from finance to our stores team, and just got my legs knocked out from under me. I realized really quickly how much I still had to learn about what really happens in the operations of a store every day. My view of the world was so headquarters centric, and that opened up my thinking in a huge way. And I also realized how much growth I had in front of me as a leader. I mean, my peers in stores had been leading huge teams from a really young age, and they were great at it. I mean, the bar for what good leadership looked like was changed for me based on getting to rub shoulders with a peer group that was operating at such a high level. And I've never forgotten those lessons, because being vulnerable about what don't you know and where do you need to grow and surrounding yourself with the conversations and the leaders and the peers that help enable that growth is just so important. And I wish I could say that I had only had to learn that lesson once throughout my career, but in some of those different job moves, it's been reminded to me. But I think a little bit of humility and vulnerability in everyone's learning journey goes a long way. And if you've got a culture that lets people have the psychological safety to say, here's what I'm struggling with, or here's what I'm working on, and then we can talk about it together, you can make progress on it. I was lucky to have a boss and peers that were like, hey, Michael, we'll help you out. And I learned a lot.
And you said something that was pretty powerful too. And I think that what I've learned over the years, and I think, Mike, I think you may agree with me. I think it's even more important. I am comfortable now being vulnerable in a position I am, right? Because being vulnerable, I hope, is going to help other young professionals not go through what I went through, right? Both from I think, we cannot be disengaged about mental health, right? And I would share with you, when I started off at Crow in the Indianapolis office, one of the things I struggled with was if I did not perform at 120%, that they were not going to hire another Black person at Crow. That was it wasn't fair, right? Looking back on it, that was just, that's a mental health aspect of it. I struggle with that. It's like, if I don't show up an hour early, if I don't stay 2 hours later, if I just don't perform at the best, right, is that they're not going to hire another Black person, right? And that's not true, right? That wasn't true, but that was me as a 22-year-old starting off at the firm. And I don't want other young people, right? You get to a point where you kind of go into dad mode with the young professionals, like you want to shield them from what you went through, right? To have their road a little bit easier. So I just, when you said that keyword vulnerability, I just needed to share that. So.
You both really talked about impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion through your stories and the conversation that we've been having. It's also said it's everybody's job, right? It's our job as leaders, but it's also everybody's job that's part of the team. When you think about how that gets integrated into daily work, and you've touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can go a little farther. What does this mean to you, Herschel, integrating this into everything that you do?
It needs to be a culture, right? DEI needs to be a culture. It's you have to be, there's two things. One, you have to be intentional, right, about it, right? You have to be intentional, but it needs to be a place where it's just not an intentional conversation, but just in the culture of your DNA, if that makes sense, right? So you have to be very intentional on certain aspects of DEI, right? Recruiting, advancement, awareness, but then there's just inherent cultural shift that you need to make when it comes to DNI, that people can show up and be authentic, right? And that's what I strive for every day. When I talk to individuals, when I work with great companies like Target, it is, when I walk into Target store, I'm sure there are Target employees, like, it is in the culture of our DNA to greet the customers, to make sure that, hey, Herschel, you look for this, you need to go down this aisle, right? That is a part of the culture, right? And we need to get to a place as a country, as a profession, more specifically, that it's embedded in your culture, and that it just, it gets to a point where we don't have to have a conversation about it because it's just embedded in your culture. Mike, would love to get your perspective from that sense.
Phil, I could not agree more. To me, I think you hit the nail on the head of what's most important, and that is it has to be in the fabric of the company. It has to be in every piece of decision making. Like when I hear some questions that are like, talk to me about company X's DEI initiatives, and when that answer is, let's talk about DEI as if it's some separate thing, then there's still a lot of work to be done. And one of the things that we observe, Trish could talk about this, and even in our finance leadership team, is While we have fantastic partners across the business, I had Kira, who leads all of talent and culture in DEI for Target, or if I had Tia, who is an incredible HR partner for our finance organization here, they're great partners to help with the journey. But it's gotta be leader led. It's gotta come from the top, from me. It's got to be part of my entire team's area of focus. And it's not something that's separate. It's part of kind of how we operate. And to make that real, like, you could gather, I'm guessing from kind of how I kicked off this conversation, I view the most important job of a leader is building a great team. Well, if building a great team is defined for us as building a great diverse team because it will be higher performing, that's just an expectation for every leader. It's not some separate DEI thing. It's a leader's job. And that, it's thinking about it that way that I think leads to lasting, sustained change and progress. And it's got to be in the fabric of how you operate. It can't be something separate.
Yeah, you're so right, right? And it's the top-down approach, right? It needs to be shown to all your family members, right? All the target family members. If it's coming out of you, Michael, it is easily coming out of someone just starting out and working for Target, right? And that is so true, right? And that is why, when my volunteers at NABA have great volunteers across the country, I always, to the best of my ability, tell them how much I appreciate them because they're volunteers, right? They are getting paid the same thing they did last year, $0, and they're doing it for the love of their communities. They're doing it for the love of the profession. And it's important for me. One thing I like to say, I always like to give people a round of applause, right? Is I know I might not be able to give you, anything financial, but I will give you a round of applause because I appreciate you as a volunteer. Because without you being boots on the ground, without you being a chapter leader, SMS directors, we're not going to get to where we need to be. And the same thing working in our organizations, right? Is we're not going to get to the next level if I don't uplift the people that's coming behind me. And that is so important.
I love the focus on culture. It's definitely been a driver of a lot of the work that I've been involved with. I've actually been our finance diversity action champion for the last couple of years. And we've really been focused on working ourselves out of our job, right? Like that's our long-term aspiration. When DE&I becomes ingrained in everything that everybody does, you don't need the committee, you don't need the separate conversation and dialogue. It's just there every day. While we know that integration and that culture is clearly the foundation and critically important, we also know there's a very specific and significant opportunity gap that needs to be bridged for Black professionals in our accounting, finance, and business-related fields. Herschel, could you share a little bit about the ways that NABA is specifically demonstrating commitment to bridge that gap and some of the activities that are happening?
Yeah, I think there are several different levels, right? And I think, I start out with being chapter leaders, right? I always argue that when you're a chapter leader within NABA, it sets you up as being a success within your organization, right? Being a chapter president, a treasurer, helps you get those leadership skills, those communication skills. That's how I started out, to being able to have the opportunity to talk to hundreds of people, talk to a Michael, right? That came not only what I learned in the firm, but more importantly, what I learned as being a volunteer and a chapter leader. Then there is just specific programs, right? We do a lot of mentoring. We also have ACAP, Accounting Career Awareness Program, right? We talk about bridging the gap. What we've recognized is that it doesn't start when you're 22 years old, right? To help bridge that gap. It starts at the high school level, right? With our Accounting Career Awareness Program, just introducing people that look like me into accounting and finance, and talking about how successful you can be within your different associations. So it is a great ACAP, thank you in the chat, is a high school program. So once again, you have the high school program, being a chapter leader, then serving on the regional, serving on the national, board. So there's just so many different areas and opportunities that NABA does in your career to make sure that you're going to be successful.
And speak a little bit from a target and then from a target finance perspective. Something we talk about a lot is if you know what the goal is, spent Herschel and I both touched on some of like, all right, what might the goal look like for representation in a team, in the culture you want to build in the team? At Target, we're tackling it kind of like we'd solve a business problem. If you know the goal, make sure we've got the right measures to track progress and where are we at and where are we going. And you work it as a team to make progress. And I'm lucky to be part of a company that's got some long history there and some progress over time to celebrate, while we'd be the first to admit there's still a lot of work in front of us. And you don't just like a business problem, you don't just wish and hope to hit a goal.
Right.
You work at it. You use the word intentional a couple of times, Herschel. Yep. You have to be intentional. You can't just hope for a different outcome and have it fall in your lap. You got to put in the work. And at Target, we've got REACH, it's our Racial Equity Action and Change Committee, that's helping us focus all of our efforts across the company, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. But one specific goal is to increase Black representation by 20% over 3 years, and that's on top of a lot of really good progress in years prior there. But it recognizes that there's still more work to do, and it means investing in communities in a more explicit way. We've got our Target Scholars Program that provides 1,000 first-year students at more than a dozen HBCUs with $5,000 scholarships. And so you have to make investments and do the work to make progress. And within our finance team, it's similar. We use data to understand, all right, if the goal is a team that reflects our guests, where aren't we there? And how do we make progress on that? And over the past few years, whether it's gender balance or people of color representation across the team, we've made really good strides, but we're not resting on those laurels at all, because there's still important work in front of us. We've made great progress in Black representation across our teams, but not fast enough progress in my mind at senior leader levels. And so that's an area of focus. And so again, being vulnerable enough to say, not only give a little applause for where we've made progress, but say, here's where we still have work to do, and let's get after it as a team, using that kind of fabric of culture woven together to make progress. That's how we're thinking about it. And I'm excited and energized by that work. I get energy from conversations like this. I get energy from every new relationship that we build along the way too. Getting to know you, Herschel, as an example of that. And so it's holding those two thoughts of recognizing progress, but being serious about, all right, where do we still have work to do?
Yeah, and the powerful thing is being a resource, right? NABA is a resource for Target on all different levels. The one thing that is so impactful is that we focus with our family members at all points of their career, right? And one of the things that I've been working on, and the association's been focused on as well, is I would call them our senior leaders that are in NABA, and helping them. I want to be very talking about intentional, right? Is we need to get more of our senior NABA members on paid boards, right, across the board, right? We talk about those gaps, right? We forget about that. There is so much more that needs to be done to get people to look like me around paid boards, right? And I'm being very intentional to make sure that you need an audit chair. I have a list of people, right? NABA is a resource. I really struggle to hear, well, we don't know, we can't find an audit chair, we can't find people to sit around my board. Like, because you haven't called me, that's why, right? And NABA is a great resource because we have those technical experts that serve in great firms, great companies that can fill those slots around those paid boards. So that's a key driver for me. And the other thing, if I may, Mike, and I think you would appreciate this, is I want to make sure that we develop and expand our minority accounting and finance firms, right? There's another organization, the Diversity of Firms, which is made up of minority accounting and finance firms, consulting firms. It is important for me and for us as NABA to uplift those minority owned, ran accounting, finance, consulting firms, right? Is we talk about supplier diversity, but sometimes I think we forget, the professional services side of it. And, I want to be very intentional. I am being very intentional, but there is opportunities to push opportunities to minority accounting, finance, and consulting firms, right? Is they need to be uplifted. And that's so impactful to our profession as well.
Love the focus on goals, intentionality, some of the specific activities you both mentioned. Personal connections are another really critical enabler and a means of providing accessibility to all. And so maybe I'll start with you, Herschel, from a NABA perspective, but maybe more from a Herschel and who you are. How do you help foster those meaningful connections and development, and what does that look like for you?
I call myself a connector, right? I love connecting people. A little backstory is, as we were developing this opportunity for this fireside chat, I was going to be in Minneapolis. I was in Minneapolis past weekend, and it was important for me, because I was so energized when we first met to prep for this fireside chat, that I met some of the other leaders at Target. I want to give a shout out to Nikki Hunt, love her to death, great NABA member, one of the inspiring, young, talented individuals at Target. So you have a good one with Nikki. But I met some other key leaders. So I was up in Minneapolis, and your leaders were flexible enough to, when we went to lunch together, right? And you really saw, to your point, Michael, it's embedded in your culture when you sit down for lunch and just have a conversation, with the Chandra Stones, right? Of just the great things they're doing, not only for their employees, but what they're doing for DE&I. And for me, is I just love connecting people, right? I love just sitting down, having one-on-one, because at the end of the day, we're all in a people business, right? Whether I'm working at Crow, working at Target, at the end of the day, we're in a people business, right? And if people are not successful, we're not going to be successful, right? So it is important for me personally just to have a personal connection, right? One of the things that I said, and it's I'm going to make it happen, is that I'm looking forward to taking Michael out to dinner, right? I am going to come up to Minneapolis specifically, and just my round of applause for Michael is to take him to dinner, because of being able to have a conversation with the CFO of Target, right? That is important, that we, connect each other, especially from a D&I standpoint. But, Michael, what's your, how do you kind of connect with people? I would love to hear that perspective.
Well, first off, I'm excited about the dinner, Herschel. So we're gonna have to figure out. We'll have to pick a spot and make it happen. I look forward to that. I might go. We've talked about the importance of an inclusive culture, and to your point, Herschel, that facilitates connections. The other thing that it does in its best form is encourages personal development too. And to me, a big part of that is making it safe for people to get outside of their own comfort zone. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Iowa. It was not a diverse town. Most of the 5,000 people living there, looked like me. I'm a white, middle-aged, heterosexual male. It's important for me to understand my identity and kind of what makes me who I am. But if I just fall back on that self-reflection, I'm going to fall way short as a leader, of the type of leader I want to be, or the type of ally I need to be in building the team and the culture that I want. And that means getting out of my comfort zone. And there's cultural ways that that's supported and important for us to support in the culture that we build as Target. But you have to work at it too. One of the things that we have in place for Target leaders in finance is an inclusion mentor. And that relationship becomes, in its best form, a really trusted, safe place to ask the questions that feel like a stupid question to ask, or to have someone say, actually, Michael, when you said that, you thought the team heard this? This is what they actually heard. And that feedback loop is so valuable to growth, but it requires a level of vulnerability and trust to kind of stick yourself out of your comfort zone. And all of those small interactions, I think, are so important to personal development. And personal development across everyone on the team comes together in the type of culture that we're talking about building.
Something that you said, I think it's so spot on, right? It is, one, having that safe zone, and we're all on a journey, right? We're all on a journey, no matter who you are, right? My personal journey here recently was learning about pronouns, right? And my pronouns, he, him, and his, and that has been a journey for me just to learn. One of the things I do at the firm, Michael, is I'm the executive champion for, we call them business resource groups. So we have African American, Asian, Latino, Pride, which is our LGBTQ plus community. Then we always have a gold carrying member of our young professional network. So they still let me in. So I still consider myself a young professional, but it is a journey for all of us, right? Of acceptance, inclusivity, and I enjoy learning more about other cultures, just to better myself as a leader, better myself as a person. And you're so right. It is important that we recognize who we are, where we're at, but we also recognize that we will continue to learn as we make all our jobs a more inclusive workplace.
Yeah, and maybe to build on that even a little bit, it asks more of leaders to know their team on a personal level that's deeper than the surface level transaction. And I think that that's important to build the culture that we're talking about. I also think it's important in this kind of Zoom, not enough human interaction world that we've all been living in the last 2 years. The number of times when you create the environment to understand what's really going on in that person's world behind their Zoom box with the perfect background and the I'll put on a smile today interaction that most business conversations start with, there's always so much more there than you get from this version of interacting, and to create the time and space to really know each other on a deeper level, I think is foundational.
Well, to your point, right, in this Zoom environment, this Zoom world it's twice as important, to your point, right, is that we need to make those personal connections. We need to be more intentional, right? It's because, we used to talk about, people show up with their mask off, right, at work, right? Well, now technically you're showing up on the screen and that's it. And there's a lot going on in people's lives, right? We learned that with the pandemic. We learned that with the murder of George Floyd. There was so much that has happened over these past couple of years. And to your point is you got to, no pun intended, break through the screen to really see how people are doing, right? And I think that's what's also powerful about NABA is that, it is at its core, how are you doing as a person, right? Lifting as we climb. Are you okay, right? Take the profession, take your career out of it, just as a human being, just as an individual. Are you okay, right? And I think I've learned that here recently, going through the pandemic, and more importantly, the social injustice. And I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. As shared earlier, and the Breonna Taylor really hit me hard because that's my community, right? My parents are still there. And it's important to get to the core of how people are doing as an individual, right? To let them know that you love them, you care for them, and you want them to succeed as an individual. Putting the work aside, right? Because work is life and life is work nowadays.
Yeah, you're spot on. The number of times where someone on the team has said, gosh, I just need to share this as something I'm struggling with. And the conversation unfolds from there, because we're all dealing with the same hard things right now. And to be able to have a work community to make some of that safe to share, I think is really important. It happens to all of us. So I'm in a little office space off our front door, and yesterday we're going to pick up my daughter because mentally she couldn't quite make it through the school day, right? Like life's been hard the last couple of years on so many fronts, and to recognize that and create space to talk about it, I think is important.
And you're dealing with it on a different level that I have to appreciate, right? Is your target family members at stores. Oh my God. And that's part of my re-evaluation of how I interact with people in public. Is just because I've seen, walking into stores and, please put on your mask. And then that person is just getting that employees get vilified, right? It's just getting yelled at. And I'm like, really? I'm like, let's take a step back, right? This is a human being, this is a person. And I try to be, to the best of my ability, more intentional, like, walking into stores, walking to a Target. How are you doing? Right? Yeah, no, I'm looking for X, Y, Z, but things good, everything okay, right? I think taking an extra 3 seconds to ask those simple questions, I hope goes a long way for individuals.
Yeah, well said.
Lots of great focus on connection. I think the development side of it's important too. And so maybe I do want to get to Q&A, but I did want to take a minute and just get your perspective on either the role sponsorship has played for you in your career or how you're playing a role for someone in your world towards the personal development side and career advancement. Maybe Herschel, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would tell you that I have, we talk, you've heard the term, you have your own personal board of directors. I encourage everyone to have their own board of directors, their own, team, but more importantly, get people that don't look like you a part of your board of directors, right? That in a million years, if we're sitting next to each other, this will be the last person that will be a part of your board of directors, right? Because there's so much we can learn from each other, but more importantly, what I can learn from other approaches, other cultures, other styles. So it's important to me just to really get a board of directors that also doesn't agree with me, right? That is unapologetic about giving me feedback. Like, no, Herschel, that was the wrong approach, right? And the other thing I think is important from my perspective is, the reverse mentoring, right? It is get young professionals to mentor you. So I don't know if you have them, Michael, or not. I would encourage you, if you don't have any young mentors, get some young mentors to mentor you, right? Because they are going to be the next Michaels. They're going to be the next Herschels, right? They're going to take Target to the next level. They're going to take Crow to the next level. They're going to take NABA to the next level. And, sometimes it's easy for the old man to get off my lawn approach, right? I have all this experience, right? But I haven't walked in their shoes, right? I've walked in my shoes, but I recognize I haven't walked in their shoes, right? And so that's important to me, right? Get your board of directors. But I think here recently, what's important for me is to get young mentors to mentor me so I can be a better leader.
So I mentioned a little bit ago the inclusion mentor program that we have, and we actually used to call it the reverse mentorship program.
Okay.
We ended up getting rid of the word reverse because it almost implied too much that mentorship should usually come one way. And if you're truly getting a diverse set of voices around you, they all come from all levels and all walks of life. And so you're spot on, Herschel. And the thing you talked about for kind of your personal board of directors, same thing's true on a team. A good team is not gonna be surrounded with people that have my career path or look like me, because we're gonna have groupthink like crazy and not enough healthy debate. I guarantee it. And so building a team that brings, again, diverse perspectives and diverse background and putting it to use and having a culture where it's okay to say, hey, Michael, I think you're wrong. Or before we decide, I think there's this thing we need to talk about. That's what makes decision making better. I just see that firsthand every day.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
So quick time check. I think we're going to move on to audience Q&A. And
Okay,
so for
perfect.
those that are participating, you can submit questions in the Q&A function in Zoom. But to get us warmed up, we actually have a few questions from some of our Target team members that are also NABA members.
Perfect.
And so Jonathan, if I can ask you to turn on your camera, and we'll start with you.
Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, Herschel and Michael, and thank you both for being vulnerable enough to have this important conversation. Herschel, I had a question for you. NABA's motto, as everyone knows now, is lifting as we climb. And as a NABA member, I've personally seen it in action, receiving a NABA scholarship that, helped me pay for grants. for grad school. So thank you. But I just want to know, how have you been able to kind of balance, reaching back and lifting while also having such a successful career?
It's a great question, right? And the term, that used to be thrown about, so much is, work-life balance, right? For me, in my role as chair is, I don't look at this as work, right? I look at this as, my parents taught me, give back to your community. I honestly feel like I'm not doing enough, to be honest with you, if I'm being 100% transparent, because NABA has given so much to me. I struggle with, am I giving enough, right? I question it every time. It's like, am I giving enough? Am I doing enough? Am I bringing in enough corporate partners? Am I getting enough members? So for me, this is what I enjoy, right? If I can change minds, if I can, bring in the next, get person to the next partner level, next director level, next senior leader at Target, that brings me my joy, right? So it's not really work or figuring out how to balance. It's just integrated into my personal beliefs and my personal culture, right? You can call it my personal culture. Is to support people that look like you, Jonathan, right? To make sure that you're going to be successful at Target. And whatever I can do to make sure that you're going to be the best of who you are, that's all I need at the end of the day. That's going to make me happy. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, appreciate the question.
Jerome, I think you had a question as well, if you want to come off camera.
Yes. Hey, Herschel.
Jerome, long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. I appreciate the time and the call this morning. I did have a question. As you know, I've been heavily involved in NABA, especially from a student perspective, chairing the Southern Region Student Conference and ACAP for the Charlotte chapter. With that, my question is student-centered. How do you encourage your employer to invest in students and build a pipeline for future leaders in the accounting field? And how can Target help to support the student initiatives of NABA?
You want me to take that first, Michael, or do you want to go first?
You can start, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, I think it goes back to being who you are and what you say you want to be, right? And from an employer standpoint is, like when I was at Crow, D&I was important to me. So I did everything in my power to, expand the opportunities for the firm, which was introducing them to NABA. We're talking about a D&I journey, going to a student conference, being intentional about, hiring diverse employees, right? And, for me, it is a business case. It's a business case as well as just the right thing to do, right? It's a business case and the right thing to do. And, I think we have to be okay with saying this is the business case of it, and this is the right thing case of it as well, to show the impact you're going to have, not only for your employees, but for the communities and, the people we serve on a regular basis. Yeah, Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's really important. And at Target, we have the luxury of, the role that we play in communities where if we just try to make progress with what we can do within our walls, we're going to fall far short of the impact that we want to have. And we are privileged to have the size and the scale to impact much outside our walls. And that shows up, I think, on the student side of things. I talked about the HBCU scholarships as one example of that, and there are others, but for us, it goes even beyond that. We're committed to spend $2 billion with Black-owned businesses over the next several years to increase our growth of those businesses. We've got a Forward Founders Initiative that's focused on Black entrepreneurs. And there's so many ways where, we've got this great retail operation that touches people's lives every day. And, the way we show up in where we source product and where we purchase, the way we show up in strengthening those communities is an impact way bigger than just the kind of within our four walls impact. And I think that, to be an active participant in change means doing that in all the places you can affect change. And we have the good fortune at Target to be able to impact way more broadly than just within the company.
And one thing I would, hopefully leave you with, Jerome, on this front is, I've been knowing you, you're a great leader. So I appreciate you. So let me say that first and foremost, but don't be afraid to challenge your leaders, right? Don't be afraid to challenge Herschel as the NABA chair. Don't be afraid to challenge Michael, right? We need that, right? We need to, if you think we are getting comfortable, then challenge us, right? Ask the tough questions, because we're only going to get better if great leaders, young leaders like yourself, challenge us, right? And say, hey, I think we may be missing the mark. How about doing this, right? So that's the other piece is, I also like to flip it to young professionals like yourselves is feel free to challenge us, right? Being blunt, call us to the carpet, right? You said we were going to do this, we didn't do that, right? And be okay with that. And if you have a culture that accepts that means you're in the right place, right?
Yeah, it's one of the most important. You've heard us talk about the importance of an inclusive culture. That's one of the powerful things a truly inclusive culture provides, is you create an environment where if you need to do something different, the team will let you know. It won't go sitting there, because we're creating an environment where voices can be heard and that can influence action. I know that you won't suffer trying to find your own voice, Jerome, but it's welcomed culturally if we're building the culture that we want.
Yes.
For sure.
Thank you all for that. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks, Jerome. Big part of personal growth and development is celebrating successes. And we talked a lot about lifting people up. One of the questions from the chat is kind of the opposite side of that. And so how do you yourself, or how do you help others build resiliency when facing job rejection or setbacks or failures? And Michael, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. So you heard me tell what it was like to go from my finance first 5 years into stores. 6 months into that job, I was like, Target's gonna fire me. Like, I'm not good enough at this. And to me, so much of this goes back to vulnerability and being able to ask for help, because I felt like I wasn't doing anywhere near enough. And I talked to my boss, her name is Jana, and kind of laid bare, like, this is where I think I'm at. This is where I think I'm struggling. And once we were kind of having that open, authentic conversation, she's like, well, let's talk about this. Like, where do you want to get better? How can I help you? And the support from my boss, once I was able to kind of lay it bare on the table, the support from my peers as I reached out to them at things that they were good at that I could learn from them. I think you have to, if you've got the right culture, it's a culture that welcomes the ask for help and leans in when people do that. And but that starts with you, right? Like, if I just keep that all bottled up, I'm going to try to work through it myself, and that's not going to work. And so I think that that vulnerability and asking for help is an important ingredient. Herschel, what do you think?
Everything you said, right? And I think the other piece, and we kind of talked about this, the vulnerable piece of it is to help a person that is struggling or had some quote unquote failures. I don't call them failures. I just call them opportunity assessments. And I like to share where I missed the mark. And I was able to become a principal at Crow, right? I've been with the firm my whole career, and I just share with them, these are where I missed the mark on, and look at me, right? I, just like you, Mike, I felt the firm was ready to walk me out the door a few times. I was like, they're going to walk me, hand me my keys to my car, and I'm gone. Right. But I am still here. The firm kept me here, and I've learned so much from that. Same thing as being the chairman of NABA, right? There are some missteps I've had, and I don't mind sharing those, but I know at the end of the day, we're going to go to the next level as an association, right? So you can't be afraid to share with other people where your missteps were, but more importantly, how are we going to get better as an individual and together as an organization, together as Target, right? And I'm excited. I know we're probably 3 minutes before it's all said and done. I can go for another hour with Michael, but I look forward to what myself and Michael, what we can do together, between NABA and Target, making a difference for the Target employees, but also making a difference for our NABA family as well as the profession. And I look forward to what's the future that's going to hold for the both of us.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Herschel.
I'm going to wrap with a question, and I'm going to say 3-word answer, but it's probably more than 3 words, but probably not the 5-minute version. One piece of advice to aspiring allies in training.
Don't be an ally, be an advocate.
Yeah, and I would say embrace the uncomfortable.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are out of time. I knew the hour would go by very quickly. I'd like to sincerely thank Michael and Herschel for taking the time, sharing their stories, their commitments. For those that submitted questions and came off camera to share today, we have a planning committee behind the scenes that did a ton of work to make this possible, and our ongoing, relationship with NABA. So thanks to NABA, and then everybody who took the time to participate today. So we had almost 300 people on the call, Target team members and broader NABA members, and appreciate everybody joining us. I'd be remiss if I didn't take advantage of the moment to close and ask everybody who's listening today to just consider one specific action that you can personally take to engage, connect, and help bridge the opportunity gap that we all know exists for our Black peers. Thank you all, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks for facilitating, Trish and Herschel. I look forward to that dinner.
Yes, I'm looking
That'll be
forward.
fun. We'll do it. Bye, team.